They say if you trust your partner, you should never doubt them without proof. That kind of advice sounds nice on a greeting card, but in real life, it's how you end up exactly where I did, standing frozen in the doorway of a fancy hill country cabin, watching the last pieces of your marriage crumble in complete silence. I wasn't out to spy on anyone. I had no intention of digging through phones, tracking locations, or sneaking around. This wasn't one of those situations where suspicion leads to drama. No, this started with a simple plan, something I thought would be a sweet surprise, maybe even a way to fix what had been feeling off between us. My wife, Maya, was away for the weekend at what she called a team-building retreat. Her company liked renting out remote places in the Texas Hill Country for these things, and I figured if I showed up with flowers and her favorite drink, we could rekindle something that had clearly been fading. She'd been distant lately, more tired than usual, less present in our conversations, always texting someone but never saying who. But life gets busy. I run a bar in Austin, and she works in HR at a tech firm. Our hours never really aligned. I chalked it up to burnout, stress, the usual. But this retreat gave me a weekend where I actually had the time to make an effort. So I did. I drove 2.5 hours to the cabin. It was one of those luxury rentals that try really hard to look rustic, stone fireplaces, cedar everywhere, big wraparound porches. I parked a little ways down the road so she wouldn't hear me coming, thinking I'd walk up, knock on the door, and see that surprised smile I hadn't seen in weeks. I really thought I was doing something romantic. I had no idea what I was about to walk into. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside was how quiet it was. For a retreat with 10, maybe 15 employees, you'd expect music, laughter, maybe some late-night conversations. But this place felt empty. Not the peaceful kind of empty either, more like something had just happened and I'd missed it by minutes. The door was unlocked, so I stepped inside. It was warm, a little too warm, and the air had that strange, heavy feel that comes after a storm. I didn't hear voices, just the low hum of something electric, like a heater or sound system left running. I walked down the hallway, calling her name once, softly, just in case she was on a call or in a meeting. But there were no other cars outside. No signs of anyone else. The only light came from the back room. That's when I should have left. Or knocked. Or at least prepared myself. The door was cracked open. I pushed it slightly and stood in the doorway. My brain couldn't process what I saw at first. I just stood there, frozen, like someone had pressed pause on everything. My wife was in the room. So was someone else. And it wasn't a team-building workshop. It wasn't a group meeting. It was the exact opposite. They didn't see me at first. I must have made a sound, because she turned and locked eyes with me. And that's when I knew for certain. Her expression didn't show surprise. It showed panic. Not guilt. Panic. Like she'd been caught doing something she thought she had plenty of time to hide. "What are you doing here?" she asked, as if I was the one who needed to explain myself. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was racing through every conversation we'd had in the last 2 months, trying to figure out how I'd missed all the signs. How long had this been going on? When did she stop talking to me and start spending her time with this other man? Her coworker, her boss, actually stood up quickly, trying to pull himself together, offering me some excuse about how it wasn't what it looked like. But I wasn't hearing any of it. I just looked at her and said, "This is your retreat? This is what you've been working on all weekend." She didn't deny it. She didn't say anything. Just stood there with that same blank expression, like the damage was already done, and she didn't have the energy to try and fix it. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't throw anything. I left the flowers and the bottle on a table in the hallway, still wrapped, still unopened. I got in my truck and drove back the way I came, not saying a word the entire way home. That was the beginning of the end. The drive home felt like it took hours, even though it was just under 3. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't check my phone. I just kept one hand on the wheel and the other digging into the steering, trying to figure out what exactly I was supposed to feel. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't sad either. It was something else, something that just sat there in the center of my chest like a deadweight. I replayed every conversation from the last 2 months, every time she said she was working late, every time she said her team was falling behind and needed her to stay in. I started thinking about how she stopped touching me the same way, how her eyes didn't stay on mine for long anymore, how she always seemed like she was listening for something else whenever I spoke. I felt like the idiot who'd been left standing in a spotlight while the whole room laughed behind the curtain. That was worse than the betrayal, knowing I'd been walking around completely unaware while everything important was already gone. I got home around midnight and didn't even bother turning on the lights. I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, sat down at the table, and stared at the place where she usually sat with her laptop. I stayed like that for a long time, not thinking, just staring, until the sun came up. When I finally moved, I didn't sleep. I made coffee. I opened my laptop, and I started looking. I wasn't interested in checking her phone or email. That's the first thing most people do. I didn't want to waste my time with deleted messages or locked screens. I wanted to know how long this had been happening and if I had missed any signs in our shared life. I started with our joint calendar. That's where I found the first clue. 3 months ago, she blocked out 3 Saturdays in a row for something labeled wellness sessions. That sounded harmless enough, but we never talked about them. She never mentioned them. When I clicked into one of the events, it said they were being held at a location about 40 minutes from the city, near the edge of the hill country. That made no sense, because she'd told me those weekends she was visiting her aunt in Houston. The next thing I checked was our credit card statement. She always handled the bills. I usually just paid my half and let her take care of the rest. But I remembered she'd used our joint card to book her last retreat. I figured maybe there was something else on there. It didn't take long. 2 months ago, there were charges at a place called Copper Fern Resort. A quick search told me it was a spa getaway spot popular with company groups, but it also offered private 2-person stays. There were charges for dinner, wine, massage packages, all booked under her name. On weekends, she told me she was working overtime. I called the resort pretending to be her assistant. I said I needed a receipt for tax purposes and gave them her name and the weekends. They emailed them to me right away. Her name was there, along with a second guest. Not a company group, not a friend. A private guest package for 2 listed under her and the same man I had seen in that cabin. There was no misunderstanding, no other version of the story. When she came home Sunday evening, I was sitting on the couch, calm as anything, with the printed receipts on the table. She walked in like she had just come back from a casual brunch, smiled, said she was tired, dropped her bag, and started heading toward the bedroom. I didn't say a word. I just waited. She paused, turned back, and looked at me. I nodded slowly and looked toward the papers without saying a word. She followed my gaze. She walked to the table. She saw her name, the guest receipts, the charges, and the dates. "Where did you get these?" she asked. No apology. No explanation. Just that. She didn't respond right away. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. I thought maybe she'd try to explain it all, maybe say it was a mistake or that I had misunderstood. But she didn't. She just sat there like we were in a business meeting, waiting to discuss logistics. "It's not what you think," she said finally, voice low, steady. "It's not just about him." "So it's about more than one?" I asked, not even raising my voice. "No. I mean, it's not like that," she said, shaking her head. "It's about me. About feeling stuck. About wanting something else." "For how long?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "A little over 4 months." I looked at her hands. No ring. She hadn't worn it to the retreat either. That hit me harder than the confession. "I thought we were okay," I said. "I didn't," she replied. "I felt invisible. I didn't know how to tell you." "So you told someone else?" "With your body." She didn't flinch. "It wasn't planned." Of course it wasn't. But it kept happening anyway. Silence settled again, heavier than before. Neither of us moved. Neither of us raised our voices. The quiet said everything. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't try to defend it anymore. She just sat there, staring down at the edge of the table like she was waiting for a verdict. And I had nothing left to say. Not yet. The following evening, I waited for her to get home. I didn't want a repeat of that cold, business-like conversation we had the night before where everything was admitted with the same tone someone might use to cancel a meeting. I couldn't leave it like that. I needed something real from her, some kind of reaction that showed she understood what she'd done. Not just that she got caught, but that she broke something that had taken years to build and acted like it could be written off like a bad expense report. She walked through the door like she had any other day, hanging her coat and placing her purse gently on the counter like the air in the house didn't feel like it was about to explode. I didn't say anything right away. I watched her for a moment to see if she'd say something first. She didn't. She looked at me once, then kept moving like we weren't standing in the aftermath of her lies. She opened the fridge, poured a glass of water, took a sip, and finally spoke. "Are we going to talk again, or are you just going to keep sitting there staring at me?" I stood up and walked toward her slowly. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to throw things. But I wasn't going to keep treating this like some administrative error she could clean up with an apology. We're going to talk now, I said. But not like last night. I don't want the calm version of you that thinks if you stay composed, this will all fade away. I want to know how many times you lied. I want to know how often you stood in front of me and said everything was fine while planning your next little vacation with your boss. I want to know what exactly I was to you while you were doing that. She didn't answer at first. She just looked down again like she had the night before. I think she was hoping I'd burn out, that I'd run out of questions, or that I was too tired to go through it again. But I was past tired. I was standing in the one place in the world where I should have been safe, and all I felt was the need to put everything out in the open so I could stop choking on the silence. Do you love him? I asked. No, she said quickly, almost too fast. It's not about that. Then what is it about? Was I boring? Was I not enough? Did I stop being worth the effort? That's not fair, she said, raising her voice slightly for the first time. You think I planned for this to happen? That I woke up one day and decided to ruin everything just because I felt like it? I think you didn't care enough not to, I said. That's what I think. I felt alone, she said. I felt like I was living next to someone who didn't see me anymore. You were always busy, always focused on the bar, on your late hours, on your stress, and I just got used to being something in the background. I was working, I replied. For us. For the life we said we wanted. You don't get to use that as an excuse. If you were unhappy, you talk to me. You don't go behind my back and start building a second life while pretending this one still mattered. She stepped back, frustrated now, finally reacting like she should have 2 nights ago. You think I didn't try? You think I didn't want to fix it? Every time I brought something up, you brushed it off. Every time I said I felt disconnected, you said it was just a phase. How many times was I supposed to repeat myself before realizing you weren't listening? I heard everything you said, I told her. I just didn't think you were the kind of person who gave up without even trying to fix what was broken. I didn't give up, she snapped. I gave in, and I regret it. But you're not some perfect husband, Daniel. You don't get to act like you've been completely innocent while I was the only one slipping away. I shook my head slowly. I'm not perfect, and I never claimed to be. But I didn't betray you. I didn't sneak off on weekends pretending I was at a work retreat while sleeping with someone I said I couldn't stand. I didn't stand in front of our friends and act like we were solid while building something else behind your back. I never planned to fall into that, she said again, quieter this time, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. And yet you did, more than once, and you let it keep going. And now I'm supposed to just believe that you're sorry because the receipts showed up and the surprise visit didn't go the way you thought it would. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but stopped herself. Maybe she finally realized that no explanation was going to change what had already happened. Maybe she saw in my face that I wasn't looking for excuses. I wanted honesty, real honesty, even if it was ugly. I wanted to feel something again, she said after a long pause. I didn't know how to get it from you anymore. That's the truth. Then you should have walked away, I said. You should have had the guts to end it before dragging me through this. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I wasn't finished yet. But if we kept going like this, one of us was going to say something we couldn't take back. I didn't talk to her the next morning. I didn't leave a note. I didn't ask her what she wanted. I didn't care anymore. I grabbed my keys, took my laptop, and drove straight to the bar before the sun was fully up. I unlocked the place, turned on just enough lights to see where I was walking, and sat at the far end of the counter where the staff usually eats before a shift. I wasn't there to pour drinks or clean tables. I was there to make a list. I pulled out my notebook and started writing. Not about how I felt, not about what went wrong, but about what needed to happen next. For the last 6 years, she had been on every emergency contact form, every joint account, every insurance policy. Her name was everywhere it didn't belong anymore. The first step wasn't rage. It was removal. I called the bank and began the process of splitting accounts. I had enough saved under a private account to make sure I wasn't trapped financially. I talked to a lawyer I knew who'd gone through a brutal split last year and got a referral to someone who didn't waste time. I wanted everything done by the book, but with zero room for emotional appeals. This wasn't going to be one of those situations where the other person begs for forgiveness and the whole thing gets swept under the rug. I was done playing husband to someone who had decided months ago that she didn't value that role anymore. When I got home that night, she was in the kitchen, but I didn't stop to talk. I walked past her like she wasn't there and went straight to the bedroom. I took out every piece of paper I had printed from the resort, the calendar logs, the receipts, and the bank statements she probably thought I'd never look at. I placed them in a clean folder and left it on the dining table. Then I made dinner for myself, ate in silence, and went to bed without saying a word. The next day, she tried to talk. I let her speak, but I didn't say much. She asked what I was planning, if we were going to therapy, if we were going to take space and think things through. I told her calmly that I had no interest in therapy, space, or pretending. I said I had spoken to a lawyer and that I wanted everything documented properly and finalized. She stood there frozen, like she expected yelling or a breakdown, but instead got a controlled, well-organized decision that didn't give her room to manipulate it. "Can we at least talk about what's going to happen to the house?" she asked. "I'm not kicking you out," I said, "but I'm not staying here long-term either. I've already made plans to stay with a friend while everything gets sorted." She blinked a few times like she wasn't expecting that. "You've already packed?" "Just the essentials. I'll come back for the rest when you're not here." "This doesn't have to be this cold," she said. "You made that choice when you stopped treating this marriage like it mattered." She didn't say anything after that. She just nodded and walked into the bedroom like she'd finally realized that there was no fixing this. That weekend, I sent an email to her company's HR department. It was short, professional, and included screenshots of her booking a personal romantic stay with her direct supervisor under the company's expense policy. I didn't send it to get her fired. I sent it because if she was going to use work as a cover for betrayal, then work had the right to know how she represented them. I signed the email with my name, attached all the documents, and hit send. Then I turned off my computer, drove to the apartment I was borrowing from my friend Marcus, and spent the evening watching a movie I didn't care about just to distract myself. A few days later, she called me. I didn't answer the first time. The second time, I picked up. "Did you send something to HR?" she asked. "Yes. They're investigating him." I figured they would. "You're trying to ruin my life," she said. "No. I'm just making sure no one gets to pretend this didn't happen." "You could have just left it alone," she said. "You already left. You're already filing. You don't get to cheat, lie, and walk away clean. Actions have consequences. You made your decisions. Now you get the results." "This is revenge," she snapped. "No," I said. "This is accountability." She didn't say anything after that. Just hung up. Later that week, I sent a letter to her parents. Nothing dramatic. Just the truth. I figured if she wanted to rebuild her life honestly, she could start with the people who thought she was someone worth admiring. I didn't send it to humiliate her. I sent it because for too long, I kept covering for her, defending her when she made cold comments in front of our friends, laughing off the way she would talk over me in public. Now she could explain things on her own, without my help. And when I finally cleared out the rest of my stuff from the house, I left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. Not because I wanted to be theatrical, not because I wanted to make a statement, but because it didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to the version of her I used to believe in. The last time we sat across from each other in the living room, there were no more papers to present, no more questions to ask, no more accusations to throw around. Everything had already been said. There was just this silence between us, thick and slow, the kind that made the room feel smaller than it was. I had come by that day because she asked to talk, and I figured after everything, I could at least give her that. Not for her sake, but for mine. I didn't want to leave anything unfinished, no open ends that would keep me awake at night. She sat on the edge of the couch like she was waiting to be scolded, her hands in her lap, face pale, hair tied up like she had somewhere to be afterward. I sat across from her, leaning forward slightly, elbows on my knees, not trying to intimidate her but also not softening anything. If she wanted to talk, this was it. I wasn't coming back after today. "I've been trying to think about what I'm supposed to say," she started, her voice low, not shaky, but forced like she had to push every word out. "And I know that nothing's going to fix what I did. I know that." I didn't say anything. I just nodded once to let her know I was listening. "I didn't come here to get sympathy," she continued. "I just didn't want the last thing between us to be a lawyer's name and an email." "Then why did you do it?" I asked again, not to reopen the wound, but because she had never really explained the moment. The decision. The exact point where she went from unhappy to unfaithful. Not the general answer. I don't want to hear about being tired or disconnected. I want the real reason. She took a deep breath and looked down, then met my eyes and answered without dodging. "Because I felt like I didn't matter anymore," she said. "Because I wanted to know what it felt like to be wanted again, without having to fight for attention, without feeling like a second option behind work or stress or whatever else was pulling you away." "I wasn't pulling away," I said. "I was trying to keep things stable." I didn't think I had to constantly perform just to prove I cared. I know, she said. That's what makes this even worse. You didn't do anything horrible. You didn't treat me badly. You were just focused. And I let that turn into something it wasn't. Instead of talking to you the way I should have, I looked for an easy way out of how I felt. And I regret it. I watched her closely. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She just sat there and owned what she did. And I hated how much I had wanted that months ago, back when I thought we still had a chance. Now that I had it, it felt empty. Do you still talk to him? I asked. No, she said. He was placed on leave pending investigation. I haven't seen or spoken to him since the day I told you everything. Would you if he called? I asked. No, she said, quick and certain. Even if things had ended differently with us, I wouldn't go back to him. Why not? Because it wasn't real, she said. It was just a distraction. It was selfish and reckless. I didn't feel anything for him once I saw what I had risked. I didn't even feel guilt while it was happening. It came after. Hard. I leaned back, feeling the weight of that. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because it showed me that she wasn't completely numb to the damage. I wasn't looking for punishment. I was just making sure she understood that what she did wasn't some phase she could brush off. I don't hate you, I said after a while. I wish I did. It would be easier. But I don't. She nodded slowly. I don't hate you either. I never did. I know, I said. But I also know that love, respect, commitment, whatever word you want to use, none of that means anything if it doesn't show up when it's hard. You disappeared the second things stopped feeling perfect. And that's not someone I can build a life with. I understand, she said. I don't want to drag this out, I added. I'll have my name off the mortgage by the end of the month. The lawyer has the final paperwork. You can have the furniture. I just want my clothes, my books, and whatever's left of my peace. You'll have it, she said. I stood up. She didn't. I looked around the living room one last time. It didn't even feel like home anymore. Just a place I used to care about. A memory with walls. Take care of yourself, I said. You too, she replied. I walked to the door, opened it, and left. I didn't look back. There was no reason to. I didn't move into anything fancy. Marcus had a spare room in his apartment over on the east side, not too far from the bar, and that was enough. It was small, quiet, and no one asked questions. That's what I needed most. No noise, no advice, no sympathy, just space to think. I brought my clothes, my laptop, and a couple of old boxes I hadn't touched in years. I didn't unpack much the first week. I just worked, slept, and kept my phone silent. Most people at the bar didn't know what had happened, and I preferred it that way. I didn't want to answer questions or explain anything. The only people who needed to know already did. The divorce went through without much trouble. She didn't fight over anything. She didn't stall or play games. We signed the papers, split what needed to be split, and that was it. No ceremony, no final words, just signatures and a few stiff nods in front of people we'd never met before. It felt like paying a bill. Necessary, boring, and strangely quiet. She stayed in the house. I didn't care. I didn't want to live in a place where every room had a memory I didn't trust anymore. Let her keep it. I needed to be somewhere that didn't come with reminders every time I turned around. The strange part wasn't losing her. It was losing the routine. Every evening used to have a rhythm. Who was picking up dinner, what show we were half watching, which bill needed to be paid. That noise had disappeared, and it left me with this unfamiliar kind of silence I didn't quite know how to fill. The first few days, I kept reaching for my phone to text her by habit. Nothing important. Just little things, like what time I'd be home or if we were out of coffee. Then I'd remember, and I'd set the phone back down. One night Marcus came home with a pizza and 2 beers. He didn't say anything right away. Just handed me the box and sat on the other side of the couch. You don't look mad anymore, he said after a while. I'm not. Sad. No. What then? Just done, I said. I'm tired of thinking about it. He nodded, like that made sense. You still talk to her? No. Want to? No. He didn't push after that, and we watched the game without saying much else. A few weeks later, I ran into one of her friends at the store. Lisa. She looked surprised to see me, but she didn't avoid eye contact. Hey, she said. I heard. I'm sorry. Don't be, I said. It's over. That's all that matters. She's not the same, Lisa added. She doesn't go out much anymore. Doesn't really talk to anyone. Not my problem anymore. I guess not, she said, then added, you didn't deserve it. I didn't say anything to that. I just nodded and kept walking. The truth is, I didn't need validation from her or anyone else. What I needed was to understand how I let things drift for so long without noticing how far apart we'd become. I wasn't perfect. I worked too much. I ignored little signs. I assumed things were fine just because they weren't screaming. That's something I'll carry with me. Not the blame for her choices, but the part one played in letting distance become normal. That's not going to happen again. If I'm in something, I'm in. And if it starts to fall apart, I won't wait for receipts to prove it. I've started going on walks at night. Nothing dramatic. Just 20, 30 minutes around the neighborhood. I leave my phone at the apartment and just walk. No destination, no plan. It helps clear my head. I think better when there's movement. It's the only time I let myself think about what comes next. I don't know if I want another relationship. I don't know if I want to live alone forever. But I do know I won't settle again. Not for convenience. Not for comfort. Not because I don't want to be alone. The bar's doing fine. Business has picked up, and we've hired 2 new people. I'm putting more time into the place, but not in the way I used to. I'm not hiding there anymore. I'm building it the way I should have years ago on my own terms, with clear boundaries between work and whatever I decide my personal life will be. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm not running from anything. I'm just living. And that feels better than it has in a long time. Sometimes I still see her name in old emails or shared contacts. I delete them when I find them, not out of anger, just because they don't belong anymore. I don't want reminders. I don't want connections that aren't real. If something's done, it's done. And this was done the minute she chose someone else over honesty. That's what I learned. Not just how people can disappoint you, but how easily you can lie to yourself if you're not paying attention. You ignore the late nights, the quiet changes, the strange looks. You tell yourself it's stress or work or just a phase. Then one day, you're standing in a cabin with flowers in your hand, and the truth is right in front of you. Next time, I'll see it coming. Or better yet, I won't let it get that far. Because now I know what it looks like. And I know what I'm worth. And I'm not letting anyone treat me like less ever again.